In section 4.3, we're going to talk about conditional probability. Okay, conditional probability is kind of based on this idea. What is the probability of an event happening if we know something else has already happened? Okay, what is the probability of an event happening if we know something else has already happened? And that leads us to this idea of conditional probabilities. So conditional probabilities are probabilities calculated after information is given. And I don't mean like I tell you, oh, there's 12 M&Ms in the jar and 3 of them are red. What's the probability we pull a red one? That's not quite the same thing, okay? We will hopefully clear that up here in this first example. So let's say you have a deck of cards. If you are unfamiliar with decks of cards, there is a deck of cards down there at the bottom, okay? I'm going to actually take a second here to just make sure, for those of you unfamiliar, these guys along here, these are the clubs, and the second row are the spades, obviously the hearts and the diamonds. I think we can get those figured out. The face cards are these last 3 rows here. Okay, those are the face cards. Aces are not considered to be face cards because there's no picture of a face on it. Okay, so no face cards there. And otherwise, I think probably that's about all you'll need to know for in terms of cards. But let's say, what is the probability of getting a heart given that the card is red? Okay, so what this means is like I had the deck and I picked a card out at random and I said to you as kind of a clue, oh, it's a red card. Well, what does that do to the probability? Okay, so now it's not just one card out of the whole deck, it's one card out of the red cards in the deck. So it's like I've given you a little bit of a hint, okay? The notation for this, just so you know, is probability heart and then this vertical line red, and that the vertical line right there is spoken as given that. Okay, given that. It's the shortcut notation. So what is the probability I have a heart given that the card is red? Well, let's go down here and look at our deck of cards. If the card is red, it is one of these 26 cards. Okay, so we know instead of out of the whole deck, like basically we can take and we can eliminate all of those. Okay, it's kind of like we have this new reduced deck that has 26 cards in it, and out of those 26 cards, 13 of them are red, which would be 1/2 or 0.5. Okay, so you can kind of see what happens. Instead of a deck of 52, we take it down to what we've been told, like the little hint part. Okay. All right, so let's look at another one that will be similar in nature. So what is the probability of getting a king given that the card is a club? Okay, so we know the card is a club. It's one of these cards in the first row. We know it is definitely not one of the cards in the last 3 rows. So our sample space at this particular moment in time is those 13 clubs. And out of the 13 clubs, only one of them is a king, which is 0.077 in terms of a decimal. Okay. I erase again. All right. So another one. What is the probability of getting a queen given that it's a face card? Okay, so what do we know? We know the card is a face card. So now we are looking at a sample space of 12 cards. Out of those 12 cards, how many are queens? 4 of them. So 4 out of 12 is 0.333. Okay, I'm going to continue, but I encourage you to pause the video and try to answer D and E on your own, and then pick up the video again and see how you did, okay? All right, so we've got the probability of a face card given that it's a queen. So again, I'm telling you, we drew a queen. Okay, that's what we drew. We drew a queen. Out of those 4 cards, how many of those queens are face cards? All of them, right? All 4 are face cards, so the probability is 1. You are guaranteed if you draw a queen that you drew a face card. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay. And last but not least, excuse me. All right, last but not least. So what's the probability you have an ace given that the card is a face card? So if you, highlighter, if you drew a face card, if I tell you the card is a face card, what is the likelihood you ended up with an ace? One of these over here. Well, you didn't. You can't have an ace. If you have a face card, you do not have an ace. That probability is 0. That would be considered an impossible event. Okay. All right. Now, moving on to the next example at the top of the next page. Suppose you roll 2 dice, so a little different scenario, but one we've dealt with before. What is the probability of getting a sum of 6 given that the first die is a 4? So let's think about what our outcomes could be. If the first die is a 4, we could have rolled a 4 and a 1, a 4 and a 2, a 4 and a 3, a 4 and a 4, a 4 and a 5. We could have rolled a 4 and then a 6. Okay, so, excuse me, we have 6 possible outcomes where the first number or the first roll of the dice was a 4. Out of those, how many have a sum of 6? Just that one. So the probability is 1 out of 6 that we would get a sum of 6, knowing that the first roll was a 4, which is 0.167 as a decimal. Okay. All right, for B, what is the probability of getting a sum of 9 given that the second die is a 2? So we're going to do, again, something very similar. So we could have rolled a 1 and a 2 second, a 2 and a 2, a 3 and a 2, a 4 and a 2, a 5 and a 2, or a 6 and a 2. Okay, so again, we've got 6 possible outcomes. Out of those, how many have a sum of 9? None of them. None of them. So if you need to get a sum of 9 and you roll a 2, we're in trouble. It's not going to happen. Okay, so there's a little bit on conditional probability. Really focus on that, that bar, okay? When you see that vertical bar, that is read given that. Just try to work that into your vocabulary, and don't be afraid to use that deck of cards on the previous page to help you. And when it says given that this has happened, figure out then, I kind of call it a reduced sample space. Figure out what is that smaller sample space. Instead of the entire deck of cards in front of me, now I can narrow it down to just the red cards because you told me it was red, etc. Okay, so be practicing on that. And again, especially that notation.